There was an email the other day, and after a preamble, it said, "I feel like I'm dead." So the reply that was sent back was very short. It just said, "Don't feel like you're dead, be dead." And the reply came back, "Show me how I can be dead." It reminded me of a story. But first, just to recap, we know now, or it has been said, that there are 4 levels to every story, like there's 4 levels to every experience. And we can know that what you can call the bottom level, when our mind can glean the moral or the purpose of that story. And at that second level, we can intuit what are the archetypes and the symbols that the stories contain. And at the third level, our soul can feel the thread or the representation in any story that represents that thread that binds us all. But we also have said that in every story there's a secret that we are now endeavoring to discover. And there's a reminder of that story, that old story, in a time long ago, in the land of the rising sun, when there was a great emperor who was somewhat enlightened. He was very aware and astute. He ruled well, but he wasn't content. He felt that there was something missing in his life. Around him he had pundits and scholars and artists and poets and musicians and a bevy of advisors and even religionists, sages. But he could see from most of them that they were only out to better themselves, to ingratiate themselves with him, to attain positions. The only ones he had respect for were the Confucianists. Now the Confucianists, he knew, would brook no nonsense. They demanded that the protocols be followed, the tradition be lived up to, filial piety and all of those other things that came with this faith or religion, whatever you like to call it. But then there were the Taoists. Now the Taoists were a motley crew. They loved to imbibe, and they could often be seen in little coteries, laughing and joking and debating. Or also, on occasion, they would be found to be chanting or exchanging poetry. But the emperor knew that they had a relationship with nature that enabled them to have powers that were evident. But it was also whispered that they had a secret. And when the emperor asked them what this secret was, the only reply they would give was that it could not be told. It could only be shown. So the emperor took it upon himself, after he'd rid himself of all of those who he knew were only trying to better themselves, to put the Confucianists and the Taoists to a test. So deep down in his palace there was an empty chamber. with blank walls. So he took the Confucianists and the Taoists down to this great chamber, and he said to them, "Create for me something that will prove to me that you are worthy to become my sole advisors. Ask whatever it is that you need, and it will be given to you." So the Confucianists requested paints of every color, every texture, and brushes. And the Confucianists merely asked for a large quantity of wine and a lot of soft cloths. And a curtain was placed down the center of the chamber, and the Confucianists and the Taoists went to work. Now, on occasion, the emperor would come down to check what was going on. And when he looked in the side where the Confucianists were, very often they were very busy with their brushes on the wall, or they'd be conferring together in a little ritual. And when he went to the side of the Taoists, for the most part they were sitting around and joking and laughing and drinking their wine. Occasionally he could see them rubbing the wall. But then it came to the end of the time that was designated for their task, and the emperor came down to see the finished work. Well, he went into the side of the Confucianists, and there on the wall was the most magnificent mural that he had ever seen. It depicted his kingdom. There was his palace. There were his wives and concubines wandering in his garden. And there at the center of the mural was he himself, sitting on his most magnificent stallion. Every detail was perfect. And of course he thought to himself, this could not be bettered. And he'd almost made up his mind that it was the Confucianists who were going to be his chief advisors. But then he went over to the other side of the chamber, and there in front of him was a blank wall. Shiny, no doubt about that, quite glossy, in fact. And there were the Taoists, as usual, somewhat tipsy. And the emperor was affronted. "How dare you insult me like this when I've put my faith in you?" Now the head Taoist, and really amongst the Taoists there was no head, but there was a spokesman, and he said, wait, draw the curtain. And the curtain was drawn. Now the emperor was still engrossed in the magnificent scene that the Confucianists had created. But then he looked on the other wall, and there he saw that the picture had come alive. That which the Confucianists had created was mirrored in the wall in total movement. The plumes on the hat that he wore as he sat on his stallion blew in the breeze. He could even see the flaring of the nostrils. The silken gowns of his wives and concubines were moving. The fish in the stream that passed through were dancing and swimming. And he said, "What is the meaning of this?" And the old Taoist said, "Well, It's really in the not doing. The Emperor said, "Is this your secret?" The Taoists nodded. How would you interpret this story now, in the place that we find ourselves?
Because everything's done in the not doing.
Everything's done.
Everything is perfect.
Yes.
In the not doing.
In the not doing. Isn't it? But as was asked the other day, how do we grasp this secret? Like it's been said over these last days, using that way of speaking or that parlance, how do we make God real? What is it that we can grasp as this secret in our self that's there permanently? Our mind, our intuition, our soul's knowing, all present, but subsumed by this secret.
You have to become empty.
Empty, absolutely. Empty.
Then everything will unfold by itself.
Yes.
Without us doing anything.
Yes. At the wedding of the daughter a few days ago, one of the friends said to me, you're so calm. There's an aura of quiet and calm around you. How have you gotten it together? And it was replied in some vein, on the contrary, it's not getting it together, it's getting it apart. But now they're intrigued. What on earth did she mean by that? Mm-hmm.